This wasn't just a royal snub, this was a public execution of a prince's relevance, carried out in broad daylight while the world watched in stunned silence. On April 29, 2026, something unthinkable happened. King Charles III drove straight past his own son Prince Harry without even a flicker of acknowledgement, as if the man standing just yards away didn't exist at all. And the most chilling part? This wasn't emotion, it was strategy. Washington, D.C. wasn't just hosting a state visit that afternoon, it became the stage for what insiders are now calling the most calculated humiliation in modern royal history. The armored motorcade glided down Pennsylvania Avenue, surrounded by layers of security worth over $100 million. Yet inside that moving fortress sat a king who refused to even look toward the hotel window where his son reportedly stood watching. No wave, no glance, no signal, just silence. Thick, deliberate, and louder than any words ever spoken. And here's where it gets unsettling. Sources say this wasn't a coincidence or a moment of emotional distance. It was a fully orchestrated no-contact zone quietly agreed upon between Buckingham Palace and U.S. authorities. A diplomatic ghosting, a living erasure. Imagine being in the same city, on the same street, within 200 yards of your father, and still being treated like a security liability instead of family. That's not distance. That's exile in plain sight. But the real bombshell didn't explode on the streets. It detonated inside the elegant walls of Blair House. A leaked document described as devastating by insiders revealed the final guest list for the state banquet. Every name printed in graceful font except one. The name of the Duke of Sussex wasn't just missing, it was there, brutally crossed out with a single red stroke. Not removed quietly, not forgotten. Crossed out, as if someone wanted the world to see the rejection. And if you think that's harsh, wait until you hear the reason. A secret internal memo from the White House Office of Protocol confirmed that non-working royals were now classified under a strict new security framework. A 2025 diplomatic clause amendment, quietly signed, barely noticed, now labels any uninvited royal attempting to attend state-level events as a level 2 security threat. Let that sink in. A prince categorized as a threat. Suddenly, everything starts to click. This wasn't just about family drama anymore. This was legal, strategic, cold. Insiders whisper that King Charles III personally reviewed this protocol before even landing in the United States. And during a private briefing, he reportedly made something painfully clear. The monarchy is not a stage for personal reconciliation. Not anymore. Not here. Not under global scrutiny. So when Prince Harry allegedly tried to secure even a 5-minute private meeting, the answer came back in the most brutal way possible. Not anger, not refusal, just a formal note from the king's private secretary stating the schedule was fully committed to national interests. National interests. 3 words that slammed the door shut harder than any argument ever could. And just like that, the reality of April 29 became impossible to ignore. Harry wasn't just distant from power, he had been surgically removed from it. While the king prepared to discuss global stability and trade deals with world leaders, the Duke was reduced to watching events unfold from a hotel suite, like a spectator to his own life. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, because this didn't happen overnight. This was a slow burn, a calculated dismantling, and the first crack appeared exactly 2 weeks earlier, April 15th, 2026. While the world was busy preparing for the royal visit, a silent disaster erupted in California. Meghan Markle's lifestyle empire, once marketed as a symbol of independence, was suddenly hit with a federal cease and desist order. The charge? Misleading labeling standards tied to her signature product, strawberry jam. Yes, jam. But this wasn't about fruit, it was about credibility. The product failed purity requirements. Distribution was suspended. And overnight, the carefully crafted image of a thriving post-royal empire started to crack. Financial leverage? Gone. Public perception? Shaken. And timing? Almost too perfect. Because just 5 days later, something even more explosive happened behind closed doors in London. Inside Kensington Palace, Prince William reportedly held a tense 3-hour meeting with senior aides. No cameras, no leaks. Until now. Sources claim this was the moment everything changed, the moment a decision was made, the moment Harry stopped being a complicated family member and became a liability. A memorandum was allegedly presented, one that argued any contact between the king and Harry during the U.S. visit would weaken the monarchy's authority, not emotionally, but politically, strategically, fatally. And just like that, a line was drawn, a line that would not be crossed. Harry was no longer operating within the royal system. He was outside it, fully. finally, officially, irreversibly. And then came April 25, the geopolitical twist no one saw coming. The re-election of Donald Trump shifted the entire diplomatic landscape. Suddenly, tensions between the UK and US escalated, and the stakes of the royal visit skyrocketed. This wasn't just ceremonial anymore, it was survival. Trade deals, defense alliances, global influence. And in that high-stakes environment, there was no room for distraction, no room for controversy, no room for Harry, because now he wasn't just a family problem. He was a risk. And the most haunting moment of all, it happened at exactly 9:00 a.m. on April 28. As the King's plane touched down in Washington, Harry reportedly sent 12 consecutive messages pleading for a private audience. 12 messages. Each one read, each one ignored. No reply, no acknowledgement. Just silence, cold, complete, and final. And that silence says more than any statement ever could, because sometimes the loudest message is the one that never comes. And just when it felt like the silence couldn't get any louder, it somehow did, because what unfolded next wasn't just absence, it was erasure. Systematic and ruthless, like someone had taken a scalpel to a legacy and cut it out piece by piece while the world stood too distracted to notice. The afternoon air in Washington carried the sound of celebration from inside the British Embassy, laughter, clinking crystal, the hum of powerful conversations shaping the future, but just beyond that reinforced security fence stood Prince Harry, watching it all from a distance that felt less physical and more symbolic, close enough to hear it, too far to ever be part of it again. This is where the story stops being emotional and starts becoming mechanical, cold, structured, almost clinical. Insiders are now calling it the shadowban protocol, a three-step system designed not to punish, but to erase, not to confront, but to suffocate relevance until there's nothing left to fight. And according to sources deep within the diplomatic machinery, this protocol didn't emerge from chaos. It was triggered by one specific act of defiance that crossed an invisible line the crown could no longer tolerate. Step 1 was authority severance. The moment Prince Harry attempted to reclaim his voice publicly, positioning himself as something close to a frontline royal again, the response from Buckingham Palace was immediate and devastating. A formal diplomatic note was quietly sent to the U.S. State Department, stripping him of any official standing. The message wasn't loud, but it was absolute. He does not represent the crown. No protocol, no recognition, no protection. And with that single move, the invisible shield that had protected him his entire life simply vanished. What happens to a prince when the system that made him a prince decides he's no longer one of them? You're about to find out. Because step 2 didn't just target status, it targeted survival. Financially, legally, publicly. The machinery of scrutiny turned its attention toward Meghan Markle's business empire. And suddenly, what once looked like a glamorous reinvention began collapsing under the weight of federal inspections. Agencies began digging into supply chains, questioning ingredients, examining compliance in a way that felt less like coincidence and more like a spotlight being deliberately switched on. The same brand that had once been protected by proximity to royalty was now exposed, naked to regulation, stripped of privilege. And then came the most brutal move of all. Step 3. The media blackout, not an attack, not a rebuttal, just nothing. No responses, no clarifications, no engagement. According to insiders, Prince William himself pushed for this strategy, instructing communication teams to stop acknowledging Harry entirely, not fight him, not correct him, just erase him from the narrative space he once dominated. And suddenly it made sense. The silence from the king, the absence from the guest list, the unanswered messages, this wasn't neglect, this was policy. Because when someone stops responding to you completely, it's not because they've lost, it's because they've decided you no longer exist in the game. And while all of this was unfolding in Washington, something else was happening quietly, almost poetically ironic, thousands of miles away in California. A regulatory dossier, cold and merciless in its language, delivered a blow that felt almost symbolic. U.S. Food and Drug Administration inspectors concluded that the signature product of Meghan's brand didn't even qualify as jam under federal standards. Too much water, not enough fruit. The verdict? Reclassified as a fruit spread, or worse, fruit-flavored syrup. And just like that, the image cracked completely. Because while King Charles III was inside the Oval Office discussing global alliances, his son was reportedly on a frantic call, trying to leverage influence that no longer existed, pushing for intervention that never came. The response he received wasn't hostile. It was colder than that. It was procedural. No one is above compliance. A sentence so simple and yet so final. That contrast, it's it's almost unbearable. On one side, a king shaping the future of nations. On the other, a prince arguing over the consistency of a jar. This is the exact moment prestige dies. And just when it seems like the fall couldn't go deeper, a new layer of uncertainty begins to surface. One that shifts the story from humiliation to something far more dangerous. Because whispers are now circulating through Washington's corridors of power about something that no one expected to enter the conversation at all: legal status, residency, the right to remain. Suddenly, this isn't about image anymore, it's about existence within the system itself. And that's when the future splits into three terrifying possibilities. The first is explosive, a moment of desperation where Harry attempts to break through the security barrier at the embassy event. But insiders claim the orders are clear. He would be treated not as family, not as royalty, but as a trespasser, physically removed, possibly detained. The image alone would be catastrophic, not just for him, but for everything he once represented. The second is quieter, but just as lethal. A retreat back to California, followed by retaliation through words, another memoir, another attempt to reclaim narrative control. But the political climate has shifted. Under a renewed administration, even that move could trigger consequences far beyond headlines, potentially opening the door to visa scrutiny and legal challenges that threaten his place in the country altogether. And then there's the third scenario, the one insiders say is already in motion: a restructuring of power within the monarchy itself. Behind the scenes, Prince William is emerging not just as an heir, but as the architect of a new royal order. Discussions of formal measures, documents that could permanently alter succession lines and strip remaining ties are no longer whispers. They're drafts, quietly prepared, waiting. Which brings us to the most unsettling detail of all. At exactly 11:00 p.m., the night before, an unmarked black vehicle left the rear entrance of Blair House. No press, no announcement, no destination listed. But according to sources, it didn't head toward the White House, it went somewhere else entirely. It went to Harry. A single envelope was reportedly handed off at a service entrance. No witnesses, no explanation, just a manila folder containing something insiders are now calling the final piece. What was inside that envelope? A reconciliation offer? A legal ultimatum? Or something even more irreversible? Because whatever it was, it didn't leak. It didn't surface. It disappeared into silence. The same silence that has been swallowing this entire story whole. And now, as the doors of the East Room close, as the toast is raised, as deals are whispered and alliances are sealed, one question hangs in the air like a shadow no one can shake. Is this the end of Harry's relevance? Or just the beginning of something far more explosive waiting to erupt? Because if there's one thing this story has proven, it's that the most dangerous moves are never the ones you see. They're the ones hidden behind silence.